Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Backlot Box Office bonus episodes, where every week we like to talk about random crap that sometimes is prevalent to what we're talking about when we talk about the box office. So getting into this week here, Derek, what did we decide we're gonna do this week here?
Yeah, so this is inspired by what's been going on the main show. Because last week, as you might be aware, Brian and Casey and Sam had a enlightening discussion with special guest Zach Dresch about one of the seminal comedies of the 1990s, a certain Arnold Schwarzenegger comedy called Kindergarten Cop. And so, because of that, and because look, we love Arnold on this show. Um, you
Mm-hmm.
know, if you haven't watched it, be sure to go into the Backlot archives on the website or on YouTube, and be sure to check out the live show we did last year, where we counted down the top 20 Arnold and Stallone movies, having those two action icons fight off against each other. So, in the spirit of fun, I figure, well, let's just do Arnold movies at the box office, go over the top 10 highest grossing movies of his career so far, and see how things lined up. Because, it's a good retro trip through his star power career and all that stuff.
That it definitely is. And I would just like to point out that Arnold versus Sly Stallone uh, countdown that we did is like the number one video that we have on our YouTube account. So
Yep.
definitely people have enjoyed it. If you haven't checked it out, definitely go check that out. Um, I was not a part of that countdown, and I'm frankly, I would have been qualified because I lived through most of the stuff for the movies they were talking about, but
Hmm.
I'm so glad I was not in that fight, because there were some very interesting things that were played that day.
Yes.
All right.
And
So, oh yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, I mean, the fact that we did not find the aforementioned Kindergarten Cop on that top 20 list has haunted us to this day. I'll
Yeah,
just leave it at that.
it's kind of a sin that that movie was. However, having just rewatched it recently, that movie was a lot darker than I remember.
Yeah, so fun story. That was the second ever movie that I saw in a movie theater after Home Alone. So my mom and my grandma took me at the ripe young age of 6 years old to see that movie. And my grandma was not prepared for the levels of violence and intensity in that movie. So yeah, that was enjoyable. But ultimately, we still lived in our house. I remember getting the VHS for Christmas that year, so it has lived on in our hearts. So
And you're sitting there going, now this is why I'm going to enjoy watching movies for the rest of my life because I got subjected to Kindergarten Cop when I was 6.
it's action, it's comedy, it shows everything that cinema can be. So
That that and bad 80s hair. Absolutely. All right. So going into that here, we have our top 10 Arnold Schwarzenegger movies at the box office. And as completely not expected at all, is Terminator 2 Judgment Day at 203.46 million dollars. Um, I call me shocked, really. I'm shocked at this number.
this was the peak of Arnold's career right here.
Hmm.
Certainly a seismic moment for James Cameron as well. That kind of really sets up, the blank checks that he'll have for the rest of his career. I mean, this was an event back in the day. The
Yep.
visual effects that won an Oscar were revolutionary at the time. Just the whole aspect of like, oh man, Arnold's coming back as the Terminator, and then ultimately realizing, oh, he's going up against another Terminator,
And
and
he's the
then
good guy.
yes, because that was one of the slow builds. Was if you watch that movie, that first 30 minutes is set up to make you think that Robert Patrick is the good guy and Arnold Schwarzenegger is the bad guy. But then when they get in that mall and you realize, nope, it's swapped. Um,
Hmm.
that's how it was. But of course, the marketing gave that all away. So giving stuff away in trailers is not new to this day and age. It
Nope.
happened decades ago. So
Clearly 30 years ago. It to me it makes me feel really old knowing that this is also 30 years old because shoot, I remember when this movie was new, and I remember, like you said, the revolutionary, the special effects and whatnot, because you're like, the idea of the liquid metal man is probably half of what sold the tickets to this movie, because that was completely between the combination of the CGI and the practical effects they used for this movie. It's so damn flawless that people, I think, probably were going multiple times just to be able to experience and what this movie was at the time.
Oh yeah, and then you add Robert Patrick, doing an incredible job on top of that. You have
Hmm.
Lyndall Hamilton, kicking ass,
Yeah, yeah.
as
She
a
kind of
very different.
yeah, she goes from the victim to the heroine in two movies.
Yep, an incredible transformation. There's just and of course just the action sequences. The truck motorcycle chase. Everything going on. At the steel mill at the end. The escape from the asylum. Just incredible stuff.
My introduction to Joe Morton. How I love Joe Morton.
Oh, the way he goes out in that movie. Oh man, that's an all
Right.
timer.
And it's one of those ones where it's like I knew him then, and as he progressed through his career, when I'm like, oh, that is the guy from Terminator. Now I like that movie even more.
Yep.
Um, so going into number two, the aforementioned Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines, the one that a lot of people gave a lot of shit for not being a great Terminator movie. I bet this movie gets a lot more love now since
Yes.
subsequent sequels have come out.
And
Um,
I mean, I liked this movie back in the day. I mean, it has some it has some cheesy moments, yes.
mhm,
But it's trying to do all the large scale action stuff that Terminator 2 did, like the scene with the wrecking ball,
mhm,
insane stuff there, like Arnold taking the coffin out at the graveyard, and hoisting it over his shoulder. And then, of course, you also have the ending, which is certainly a wild ending to pull off in a movie like that, but has made it very memorable to this day. I'm actually kind of surprised this ended up being number two, given how it was kind of despised.
yeah.
You know,
I
and
th
it's also
I think a lot of it though is that, it's 2003. I mean, we're still kind of in the infancy-ish of mass internet, social media, stuff like that. We don't
yep,
our digital viewings aren't like they are now in 2003. So I think it's a lot of probably a lot of like word of mouth going, you know, did does this movie really suck, or somebody going to the movie basically to go, is my friend telling me that he just doesn't like the movie? Because I mean, I also think of that there is, you know, we bring up Terminator 2, and one of the names that you did not bring up that I know a lot of people were kind of upset about was the replacement of Edward Furlong
yep, with Nick
as
Stahl.
with Nick Stahl as John Connor. you know Between that, and I know that a lot of people weren't too fond of the hybrid version of the Terminator X, Terminex, or whatever we wanted to call her,
Yep.
in this one. So I agree. I think that this thing, but I think maybe it's because, again, it's 2003. The windows of theatrical releases are longer, at that, 20 years ago. We don't have that whole, oh, I'm just going to watch it on streaming, or when it comes on to VOD in 2 months, 3 months, whatever the case is. So maybe just more people going to go see it, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I also know it was a big summer of sequels. Everything from like X-Men 2 to Bad Boys 2
Mm.
to like Legally Blonde to Charlie's Angels 2.
I
I
like how you
just
like
remember,
action, action, action,
yeah,
Legally Blonde
yeah.
action.
And also The Matrix Reloaded, which I think was like the biggest sequel of that summer period. So
Hmm.
the other thing I had to look up really quickly because I had to figure out what the timing of this was. So this came out in July of 2003. And a month later, Arnold Schwarzenegger announces he's running for governor of California. So this is kind
Okay.
of the wrap up, if you will, of Arnold's original movie making career before he segues into politics for 8 years or so.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe if it was still in theaters, people are like, I'm gonna go see the Terminator before I can't go see another Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. Maybe.
That could be. So
Um, do you even remember who even did Terminator 3? Because I mean, because it wasn't James Cameron into this point. Because at
no,
this point, we finally got it segued into somebody else.
yeah, the director of this movie was Jonathan Mostow. He's probably best known for the Kurt Russell thriller Breakdown from '97, and then also the submarine Matthew McConaughey movie U571.
I've at least
So
seen that one. I've at least
yes,
seen that one.
so those are the movies that he had made before this.
Has he made anything since then? No, I'm just kidding.
Not well. I'm sure he has. I can't recall it offhand, but I'm sure he has.
All right, so coming in at number 3 for Arnold Schwarzenegger, um, starting to see a slight trend here for his top 5 at least here. True Lies at $146.28 million in '94, because again, this is one of those, if anybody ever notices, of Arnold Schwarzenegger movies that haven't gotten updated movie releases as of recent, this is one of them because this is also another James Cameron film.
Yep,
Right?
yep,
Yes.
yep.
Yeah. Like, because again, this is one that is never seen a Blu-ray release that I'm aware of here, and definitely
Nope.
not. And I tell you what, this is one of those ones I would love to get my hands on finally after all of these years because, you know, I I guess I personally myself did never ever picture when you first hear about Jamie Lee Curtis, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Tom Arnold
Yep.
in a
Tom
movie,
Arnold's one
and it
memorable
worked.
film role.
Oh, he's got like 2 or 3. Tell that to Casey because doesn't he Die Hard for Little Giants?
Well, he's not in Little Giants.
Oh,
He's
wait,
in
which
Big
one?
Bully.
That okay, that's what I'm thinking of. Okay.
Yes, yes. Speaking of
So,
Rick Moranis.
yeah, there you go. I was like, I knew I had it right. I knew there was one of them. Uh, I don't know. This is one of those ones where I would really love to see True Lies get like a theatrical re-release just for the sake of argument, just because I don't think a lot of people nowadays, because of Cameron basically off doing his thing and whatnot and paying no attention to old movies, his older catalogs to get them updated. There's probably so many people who don't even know this movie even exists anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I to be fair, I do see True Lies appearing on cable every once in a while still. It still gets some play there. I know there's been some rumblings about like I remember way back in the day, like in the early 2000s, they were supposedly working on a special edition DVD of this. But
Hmm.
then once 9/11 happened, James Cameron kind of got cold feet on that because he didn't think the movie would play as well in a post 9/11 world, which I think was also the reason they kind of scrapped doing a sequel to the movie as well. So that has something to do with it. But still, again, much like T2 and T3, this has some incredible, huge action sequences. You know,
Hmm.
the Harrier jet at the end. Like the chase scene where Arnold's riding the horse through the hotel. The opening spy sequence where like he dances with Tia Carrere and does all sorts of James Bondish stuff. There's a lot of fun stuff in here, and of course, Jamie Lee Curtis is really fun. Bill Paxton's really fun in this.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Bill Paxton being super sleazy. It's hilarious. There's a lot of fun stuff in this movie, and you're absolutely right. It does deserve a little bit of a reappraisal these days.
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of those ones that I think Cameron just needs to spend a couple of days or give it to somebody, let them work on it, give a stamp of approval on it, and give us a 4K release of True Lies just
M-
because it needs
m-
it.
Maybe when Avatar 2 comes out, which is supposed to be a year from now, we're actually almost at the 1 year mark before Avatar 2 comes out. Maybe that's what they'll finally give us is, hey, just to tie in with this, or maybe like when it comes out on home video, be like, hey, here's the Abyss and True Lies finally on
Oh my
disc.
god. Oh my
Wouldn't
god,
that
I
be
would love
swell?
both of those. At least Abyss shows up like on HBO Max and streaming, places and whatnot. True Lies, it never shows up anywhere.
Well, and also the Abyss actually has had a 4K remaster completed. It exists.
It just hasn't been released to the public, is what you're saying?
Correct. It's all again. Hopefully, once Cameron has a free minute, once he wraps up Avatar 2, assuming it doesn't get delayed again, maybe we'll finally get it. Who knows? So,
Oh,
fingers crossed.
lots of them, lots of fingers crossed. Because yeah, there's a lot of those movies in the Cameron and Bigelow section where I'm like, just give me just give me, come on, just give it to me.
Yep. Yep.
Um, Talking in regards to recent 4K releases that are of Schwarzenegger's here is Total Recall coming in number 4, $119.39 million, 1990. I'm pretty sure this is not a movie I was watching in the theater when I was 12, but I certainly would tell you is this is definitely a movie that I have watched numerous times This movie never gets old, even though some of the quote unquote special effects and or the ways the future exists definitely have not aged well. This is one of those movies that I think is very synonymous for when people think of Arnold Schwarzenegger, they think of Total Recall, or they think the weird baddie space movies, they think Total Recall.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, this is I think where the Arnold movies really started to get big, because this obviously has a lot of visual effects.
Hmm.
The Mars landscapes, the makeup effects, all sorts of crazy stuff going on here, and of course Arnold teaming up with Paul Verhoeven, who makes his own crazy stuff too, being able to kind of pull something off like this off at the budget that it is. Again, this is a movie that I know I watched on basic cable whenever it would show up,
Oh yeah,
growing up. So, this
obviously edited for television.
yes, yes, no three-breasted women in those versions. But still, it's again got a lot of solid stuff in there. Early Sharon Stone in there, Ronnie
Hmm.
Cox, all sorts of makeup effects. Yeah, it's just a total package, and certainly a movie that is held up, and certainly a movie that does not need to be remade at all, because a remake doesn't exist with this movie.
Okay, I will stand on the hill.
Here we go.
I actually enjoyed the, and I wouldn't even call it a remake because they changed the story up. I would almost call it almost like not even a remake or just more or less
A
taking cues,
reimagining.
a reimagining. Yes, a reimagining of the original because there is no Mars. It's a they changed things enough in in Total Recall with Colin Farrell, and I do think Colin Farrell does a good job. The directors or extended cut, whatever it's called or whatever, I find fascinating well. So I will stand on the hill for the Colin Farrell version. It's not as bad as everybody wants it to be, but I think the reason why that is because everybody wants to compare it in typical true remake fashion. People are like, I don't like it because it's not this. It's not the Arnold Schwarzenegger one you know whereas like if you took it as a standalone movie, I think it definitely holds some merit and it still pays homage to the original without trying to be the original.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, all I can say is, I mean, I did fall asleep in the theater watching the Total Recall remake, so that's my judgment on it. So there you go.
You fell asleep, oh come on. All right, so coming in at number 5 as we completely shift gears from the total action superstar that is Schwarzenegger to 1988's Twins at $111.94 million. His one of a couple forays into comedy that involves Danny DeVito.
Yes,
Speaking of sequel remakes, reboots, and all the fun stuff, we get Twins here.
yes. I mean, for all that we talk about Kindergarten Cop these days, it's kind of hard to believe. We kind of forget that Twins was kind of really Arnold's biggest comedy hit back in the day.
Hmm.
And again, obviously, we've heard the news recently that Arnold and DeVito and Ivan Reitman are going to go back at it early next year. They're going to make triplets with Tracy Morgan ascending to the Eddie Murphy role. Um, you have to wonder, are those, can those guys strike lightning twice? I mean, that's a hard thing to do. Um, you know, I mean, obviously, because Arnold really hasn't been in much movie stuff these days, unless it's like a sequel to the Terminator or something like that.
Hmm.
But I'll be very curious to see, how an older Arnold, can fit back into the comedy scope of things. Ivan Reitman hasn't done a movie since Draft Day, if I'm not mistaken. Um, DeVito obviously still shows up on stuff, I mean, and of course he's always doing Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Right.
Um, and I know you talked about this before, seeing how Tracy Morgan can fit into that space with those guys.
The only thing that's made me as I literally as I'm thinking about this with Tracy Morgan, I'm thinking, we're calling it triplets, but clearly there's an age discrepancy between Schwarzenegger and DeVito, and then Tracy Morgan. I do think, like, for the sake of chemistry, because there was the talk that the Tracy Morgan role was going to be going to Eddie Murphy. And
Yep.
I think age wise, it clearly would have fit better. But I think chemistry wise, I think Tracy Morgan would have a better chemistry with DeVito and Schwarzenegger.
Yep.
So I definitely think it's going to lend itself better. But as I'm thinking about it, going, pretty sure DeVito and Schwarzenegger both could be his father, let alone his brother. But um,
I
I'm
mean,
look,
it's
I'm.
a ludicrous premise no matter how you cut it. So I mean,
This is true,
that's you can go with the flow.
and I'm looking forward to it just simply because I think you might be onto something with the sake of you know, Arnold, outside of Terminator and whatnot, and yes, Arnold Schwarzenegger was in like in Expendables movies, but he was more of, he
A
didn't do
supporting
a whole,
player.
more of a supporting player. He wasn't doing a lot of the heavy lifting in those movies,
No.
and he is kind of getting at that age where he's, you know, for the sake of like the Al Pacinos, the Robert De Niro's, the ones that have been around and they've done their time. Let them make whatever movies they want.
Yep.
They've paid their dues and whatnot. And he's also getting to that age where he clearly knows I may be in exceptional health for my age
Yep.
because of what I've done throughout my entire life. But he probably also knows I'm getting to an age I can't do this shit anymore.
No.
And it's not
No.
like you can get a body double who's going to look like 70-year-old Arnold Schwarzenegger who can do what he can do. So, let him get back into the comedy because, frankly, you and I would probably agree the comedy of Arnold's past. There's a lot of good comedy in there, that
Yeah.
he kind of fell off that, like you said, he kind of fell off that comedy wagon because he became the big action star. You know, I think there's a lot of those actors that are like, oh, I did do all this comedy, but as soon as they finally kind of found that niche where they knew it worked, then they never went back. I think of like Michael Keaton.
Yep.
I miss Michael Keaton of like the Mr. Mom, the Multiplicity, the Burbs, and it's like, you know, I got a little bit of that when he played the chief in the other
Other
guy,
guys. Yep.
but otherwise, it's always super serious Michael Keaton.
Yep.
So I'm looking forward to that. That's why number one, that's why I liked old Arnold Schwarzenegger of the 80s, where he did kind of the 80s and early 90s, where he was like action movie, comedy movie, action movie,
Yep.
comedy movie. He switched them up every other one to give you something to let number one, probably let his legs stretch or whatever, But then we get movies like Twins, we got Junior, we got Jingle All the Way, So I'm looking forward to what Triplets does bring us. Do I think it's ludicrous? Absolutely. But you know,
That,
he
that's
can't do these movies. Let him pass the torch. He he sort of passed the torch when he did the was
the
what
rundown.
thank you, the rundown, yes,
Yep.
with the Rock, where you literally watch him kind of pass the torch.
Yep.
Let the
Have fun.
let let the Rock have it because he clearly is this generation's Arnold Schwarzenegger. So give me more funny Arnold Schwarzenegger because we know he can pull it off.
Hmm.
All right, coming in at number 6. Yes,
Speaking
the
of hilarity and puns.
hilarity in puns ensued. Oh my god, the one-liners in this movie, holy shit. Batman and Robin, $107.33 million in 97. The one of two of the original 4 Batman movies that does not have Batman as the top billed actor. That
Yep.
Arnold Schwarzenegger outbilled George Clooney, which
Well, I mean,
still
and that
fascinates me to this day.
I mean, it kind of makes sense because you've still got peak Arnold versus George Clooney, who only has like 3 seasons of ER and From Dusk to
Yep,
Dawn under his belt at this point.
true.
So you can kind of tell why Arnold would get top billing for this.
But the part that's funny though is that I mean, and I realize that there's contracts and studio guilds and all that crap involved and whatnot, but it's like by 97, Arnold's done his time. He's already been in the business for 20 years. You know, just put his name just to the right. Let George Clooney have that shine. Hey, George Clooney is Batman. I mean, granted, Clooney will tell you that I was not a good Batman, um, but I was Batman. So, um, but this number does not surprise me though because this is the year I graduated from high school. Batman and Robin was everywhere. If there's one
Hmm.
thing that Warner Brothers did that year was market the living hell out of Batman and Robin, because I even remember, I think it was McDonald's had the quote unquote the frosty mug, like glass mugs that you could buy, because obviously, with Mr. Freeze kind of thing.
Yep.
I had the glass mugs, from that, between toys, everything like that. I mean, they were marketing the living crap out of it. So I'm actually not surprised that, that if Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to be in a Batman movie, that it would have made the top 10, you know.
Yeah, again, the Batman movies up to this point, they had been big deals in their respective summers, so even with a movie that was as horribly received by audiences as Batman and Robin, the fact that it still made well over $100 million meant, like people were still going to show up for this no matter what, because it's a
Mhm.
Batman movie, and whenever a Batman movie happens, even to this day, even as we look at going into the Batman here this coming March, when there is a Batman movie, people are going to show up for it. So
Mhm. I will say, and this is just me being the nerd about it. You have it, I don't, and I'm jealous. That what it is the fact that Batman Forever and Batman and Robin both have amazing soundtracks and are worth the price of admission just for the music from those movies. And I said, because
that's
you have that wonderful, beautiful Batman and Robin LP that came out that I wish I had.
yeah, that was the record store day exclusive on that
Oh.
one. So, and that was very much a split decision. Like, it's Batman and Robin, but it's also peak 1990s soundtrack album for a movie.
Hmm.
So I had to do it. I had to do it.
Well, if you ever feel the need to purge it from your inventory, I know exactly a home that it can go to. I'll just say that it'll go right next to my Batman Forever soundtrack. Um,
That's right. You did get that one. That's
I
right. So
I did. Coming in
nice.
at number 7, the sorry, not even the Eraser, just Eraser at $101.3 million. For me, this is one of those movies, like, I remember it a little bit, but for me, it's a very forgettable movie, because this is the one with, Vanessa
Vanessa
Williams, right?
Williams, James
Yes,
Caan.
yes. Like, this is one of those ones where it's like, I don't remember much about it. I don't know, there's just something about this movie that's not very memorable, but I think, again, it's the mid-90s, so, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger is in that huge name of himself right there, so, you put Arnold Schwarzenegger in anything, it's probably gonna break damn near almost 100 million.
Yeah, again, this is peak summer action movie stuff going on here. I know this is the same summer as like The Rock and Twister and Mission Impossible, so it's a very action-packed summer, and I think Eraser was able to kind of keep that trend going. I know it opened also right before Independence Day as well.
I say
Um,
Independence Day was 96 too, right?
yeah, this I
Yeah,
think this came out just like a couple weeks after Eraser, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah.
So again, this is where Arnold kind of starts to downturn a little bit. Again, this was still a big movie back in the day. I can remember the promotions. Arnold saying "You're erased" and "Your luggage." Um, you know, but certainly this is where things start to go a little downhill from him in that respect. Before we get to like the movies like was it End of Days and the 6 Day stuff that doesn't even come close to entering this top 10 list.
No.
So and then
Even
of
though I
course,
I I enjoy End of Days, I will just say that it's not a great movie, but I enjoy that movie.
he's trying something different. What can I say?
Exactly. And Gabriel Byrne is amazing. All right. So, off of Eraser and into the movie that started this conversation, Kindergarten Cop at $91.46 million. As I stated before, and having just rewatched this here recently, this it has kids in it, but this is definitely not a kids movie. This is definitely an adult Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that is PG-13 that happens to have kids in it.
Yeah, and if you think back to around this period, Arnold is really starting to make a big, strong impression with children. Because
Mhm.
he's doing stuff like that presidential fitness council stuff. Trying to get kids to do
Yeah.
PE stuff and things like that. he is certainly starting to skew toward a young audience. Although, again, this is during the age where you could still have people doing, hard R action movies and still be able to get away with appealing toward a younger set.
Because
So
when we were that age, we didn't care that it was rated R. We still got into the theater to go watch it anyway.
exactly. Um, so yeah, I mean, and certainly the advertising for this movie was, very cuddly, like, oh, here's Arnold with the kindergartners, and there's doing funny stuff. I mean, definitely emphasizing the kids and the comedy over the action, which is where we get all those big surprises when we do watch or rewatch, and like, oh yeah, there's action in here and violence and blood and so forth.
Hmm.
So, but again, it was an interesting mix and the type of mix you really don't get, which might even explain why it's held up because they don't make movies like this anymore.
No, and definitely if they did remake Kindergarten Cop, that entire third act would be placed in a completely different location. It
Yes, I
would
mean,
there would not be a shootout in a school. I'm just saying.
this because I've never actually fully watched it. Now I'm very curious to see what the plot arc is of Kindergarten Cop 2 starring Dolph Lundgren to see exactly how they navigated those waters back in the day of 2017.
Trust me, I when I was working with video rentals when they were still around at that time, and
Hmm.
that came out, I put that on the shelf, and I was like, "Who on what earth convinced Bill Bellamy and Dolph Lundgren to go, yeah, Kindergarten Cop 2, that sounds amazing."
I'm genuinely surprised that Universal hasn't tried to crank out more Kindergarten Cop direct-to-video sequels, finding some other semi-washed up action heroes and putting them in the Kindergarten Cop formula. I
Jean-Claude
would think.
Van Damme said no.
Oh, that
He's
would
like,
seem like it right checks by itself, but what do I know?
but that's just it though. If Van Damme said yes to that, I think that would actually sell. I really think it would because especially seeing Van Damme as of recent that I think Van Damme is very self-aware
Oh yes,
of where he is in his career.
yep.
Because when I watched the Mercenary, what is the heck the movie?
The Last Mercenary on
The
Netflix.
Last Mercenary. He clearly knows what kind of movie he is in. So I would love to see Van Damme say, "Yeah, I will do a Kindergarten Cop movie because that would be amazing." Just saying. Because there are those aging action stars who don't get it. They don't. They think they're still that guy from 1980, and at least
Yep,
Van Damme
Tom
is
Cruise.
like, Tom Cruise is gonna ride that Scientology train all the way to the bank. But yeah, at least Van Damme knows what kind of movies he's in nowadays.
Yep.
What just happened there? I'm losing pictures here. I don't know what's going on.
Oh boy.
There we go.
All right.
All right. That was strange. All right. Coming in at number 9, Terminator Genesis. Because when I think of great, amazing top 10 movies for Schwarzenegger's career that have the word Terminator in it, Genesis is not what I think of. Coming in at $89.76 million. Of all of the Terminator movies that I have seen and or owned and or watched, whatever the case is, this is literally the only one that I have and have never actually watched. And part of it is because it has such a stigma to it. And this is that movie that I refer to where people are like, you know what, Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines isn't so bad actually.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think part of the big deal with this is that, back when this movie came out in 2015, this is right around the time where Arnold was kind of restarting to rebuild his movie career
Mm-hmm.
after leaving office. We had those smaller movies like, was it like The Last Stand or Escape Plan or Sabotage? But this is kind
Mm-hmm.
of finally like his first big movie.
Hey, I'm
Um,
coming back as the Terminator.
you know, and that had a lot of curiosity because obviously Terminator Salvation had happened while he was in office. Obviously Arnold did not appear in that movie except as a 1 minute complete 1984 CGI cameo.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there was that statue just seeing like Arnold's going back into the Terminator mode, and we just have to see that. Um, Granted, I did see the movie. I went there opening night. I completely hated it, and still do to this day. Um, but there's
I
always that thing with the Terminator franchise where every installment just has that curiosity of are they actually going to do it? Are they actually going to pull it off? And
mhm.
to varying levels, we still have that disappointment. So,
Yeah, and that's where, like, and I think part of it is too is that, like, and so far, and obviously we haven't seen on here is the most recent one with Dark Fate, which I personally actually didn't mind Dark Fate. I actually kind of enjoyed because they literally spun everything on its head, and I'm kind of curious where they want to go with it going forward. Um, but one of the things I do think that Genesis probably actually got hurt by is by the time they decided to try to mix things up a little bit, it's 2015, the internet
yep,
and social media is in full effect, and, you know, barely by week 2, the spoilers are out there. You know what the quote unquote new spin is, with John Connor,
yep.
and, and people probably going, "Well, I'm not gonna go see that," you
This is
know?
sacrilegious. How dare they?
Ex Well, because I already know that, one of the reasons why, Casey never watched, Dark Fate is because he already knew how the first 10 minutes opened up, and he was like, "I'm boycotting that movie." Um, so I honestly I think that might be part of it, because, word of mouth is one thing when it comes to how a movie is driven and whatnot, but I definitely think, like, social media and spoilers and all that stuff on online and whatnot definitely has a huge impact nowadays compared to what it was 20 years ago, I really think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So coming in at number 10, not the first, not the third, but the second Expendables coming at $85.03 million. I'm actually myself personally kind of surprised. Well, I am surprised, but I'm not in that Expendables 2 overdid the first Expendables, but based on what the first Expendables was, why it didn't do better, or does
Well,
this
well,
first one not count because he's more of a cameo?
yeah. So that's exactly what I did. I did not count any cameo roles in building this
Okay.
list because, again, I know certainly there was a bit of the first Expendables movie that was advertised on. Hey, we have Stallone and Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis in the same scene, um,
At
but
the same
really,
time, right?
I mean, Arnold is only in that movie for 2 minutes at most. I mean, he leaves that scene before they're even actually finished, because
Right.
after he exits the scene, Stallone and Bruce Willis are still talking. Um, so because of that, I didn't put it in this list. If I did put it in this list, it would be at number 7 with
Okay.
103 million. But I put Expendables 2 in here because he does have a much more significant role in that movie. He actually had star billing in that movie. So that's what, I figured we'll have one of those movies in here. So I'm going to put the one that's probably the more significant and one that can actually be qualified as a Schwarzenegger movie.
Well,
But it's just semantics.
if memory serves me correctly, one of the reasons why he only had the small bit that he had in the first Expendables is he was still in office at the time, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
They filmed his role on a Saturday. I think he was only there for like a few hours all told on the set before he had to get back to governating. So that's why they only were able to muster as much as they did. But by the time they were filming Expendables 2, he has left office at that point and is able to
Hmm.
contribute much more. So,
Yeah, as I was literally thinking about it out loud and the timing wise, I'm like because I immediately was like, wait, no, yeah, the first one he's only really cameo esque and whatever in the first one, so this does make sense. But that does prove to be a very interesting point that even though he's not in, like, quote unquote starring uh, billing in the first Expendables, if that would have been in the case here, that would have pushed the second Expendables off the list here. In your research or anything like that, did you find any other movies that he would have had like a bit part in that would have altered this? Had you included like cameos and small roles like that in?
one thing that he might have fit in, and this is really bending the rules. So he had a voice role as the White Wolf in 2001's Doctor Dolittle 2, with Eddie Murphy. which made over $100 million back in there. I didn't count that as well because, again, that's a very small role. Definitely
Yeah.
not a movie that was, again, I tried to steer toward movies that were really advertised as
As Arnold
Arnold
movies.
movies, because that just feels more significant for this stuff.
Hmm.
But otherwise, his other cameos, stuff like the aforementioned The Rundown, or another Ivan Reitman movie he made, Dave, back in the day. None of the other stuff notched on this list at all. So,
Yeah, I do find it. One thing I do kind of find fascinating though is, I mean, we clearly he has a very good working relationship with Ivan Reitman and clearly James Cameron and whatnot.
yep.
Um, that maybe once he finally gets his new niche and whatnot, maybe he finds another new director that he's got that great chemistry with, that we're gonna start getting some good old man Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. I would definitely look forward to that. Granted, now that they've greenlit Expendables 4 finally and whatnot, I am kind of curious as to see how that all plays out, and if we do get more Arnold Schwarzenegger in that, because I mean, it sounds like from with the Expendables 4 is that it's going to be more of a Jason Statham movie more than it's going to be a Stallone movies. But I mean, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, even when they were announcing this, because the movie is basically in the can at this point, and I didn't hear anything about Arnold in the casting announcements for that movie. You know,
Oh.
and maybe that's because, again, to your point, Stallone supposedly isn't in the movie that much. Maybe Stallone was the gateway to Arnold most of the time, most likely.
Hmm.
So if you're like, well, if Stallone isn't in it that much, then probably no reason for Arnold to be sticking around either. That's just my guess.
Yeah. Oh, maybe. And who knows? Maybe it's a matter of we don't have all of the official cast lists, given to us yet. Maybe they've been doing a decent job trying to keep that under wraps and whatnot.
Perhaps.
Do you have any movies that you think that, granted they didn't make a top 10, they haven't made, but are kind of the underserved, these should have gotten more love to have gotten a bigger box office kind of thing? Because, one of the movies that is in this list that I do really feel is underappreciated a lot of times is, I wish that we would have gotten Last Action Hero on this
Yeah,
list.
yeah, and there's a reason for that because kind of a couple of reasons. The first is obviously the movie had a very mixed box office reception back in the
Yep.
day,
Yep.
but also the real reason it really got its box office legs taken out from under it is because it opened exactly 1 week after Jurassic Park,
Oh,
and when you open
it,
against Jurassic Park,
you don't
you
have
don't
legs
really
in the
stand a
first place.
chance. Nope, nope. The T
Because are
Rex
we?
bites them off.
Because are we talking the original? We're talking the original Jurassic Park, right?
The
The very
original
first one.
Jurassic Park.
Okay. Yeah, that would definitely be like, you know what, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you've got star power. They've got a dinosaur.
I do see here if we did continue, 11 would have been End of Days. Number 12 would have been Terminator Dark Fate. Number 13 would have been Jingle All the Way. 14 Predator. And 15 would have been Last Action Hero. So top
And yeah,
15, yes, but definitely not top 10.
and there's another one that's kind of the you look at some of these ones and be like, oh no, you could take that one off the list, but like the fact that we've got a movie like Predator doesn't even break his top 10, and that's one of those movies that really helped push him out of the I am Conan being voiced over by bad voice actors and whatnot to the full on action star that he is today,
Yep,
or
yep.
was anyway. So it's been a very fascinating just to see what kind of movies, and who knows what Arnold Schwarzenegger brings. Maybe we'll get another $100 million movie out of him. But I mean, unless he gets the right movie, do you see it happening, or do you see it more of it's the torch has been passed? He's got to just at this point, like I said, I think the torch has been passed, and he needs just, if he's going to continue to make movies, just have fun with it. If he's going to make a Terminator movie, awesome, great. If he's going to make a triplets movie and an Ivan Reitman movie, because frankly, between that and Junior, make more Ivan Reitman movies. I want to see funny Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I think it's just time for Arnold to have the torches passed. Let him have some fun.
Yeah, I mean, again, to your point we were talking about earlier, Arnold had that side career in comedy. He can lean back into that as long as you find the right properties for him to do that. To that extent, I think we just all have to put our eggs in the basket that triplets ends up being good, because if it is good and if it is successful because of that, that might open the door. So
Hmm.
we'll have to see.
I can't wait to see old man Danny DeVito on the screen. Yes. All right. That has been the box office backlot box office bonus episode
Yes.
of this week, and I can still not talk tonight. Um, Be sure to go check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterbox HQ. Subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, uh, Amazon, YouTube, all that fun stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that fun stuff here. Uh, Take it away there, Derek.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Hit us up in all the usual places, whether it's on the podcast feed or the website or any of our social media outlets or the South Dakota Film Community Group or the Patreon. So many facets. Also, we'll have a South Dakota Film Community Group meetup. That'll be on the 24th, I believe, at 6 p.m. at Full Circle Book Co-op. Be sure to meet many of us down there if you're so inclined to talk about movies, because that's just what we love to do. So, yeah.
Definitely. All right. Have you come up with any good ideas of what we might be doing next week here?
It'll be one of two paths. It'll certainly be something Ghostbusters related. Either we will look at the career of the featured director of the month, Mr. Ivan Reitman, uh, analyze the movies that these guys have covered on the show this month and other ones from his heyday that were blockbusters but just didn't have the time to cover. Or we might go into Ivan Reitman's most other common comedy muse besides Arnold, and that would be Mr. Bill Murray. Either one of those routes, there will definitely be some overlap there, but
Mm-hmm.
they'll each be fascinating journeys. So find out next week to see where we go.
Awesome. Well, everybody, it's been great, and we will check you out here next week.
See you then.
Bye.